David Daniels had never expected to be called before the Galactic Senate. He was just a simple human, living in the middle of Earth, with no idea that his life was about to change forever. He had been busy working in his quiet office, dealing with reports and emails, when he received a strange summons. It was an official communication from the Galactic Senate. At first, David thought it was some sort of mistake. Why would they need a simple human like him? The message was clear, though: you are required to appear before the Galactic Senate. In 2 Earth weeks, your presence is mandated to discuss an important matter regarding a union between your species and the Galactic Council. David couldn't believe what he was reading. Union? Between Earth and the Galactic Council? This sounded too big to be true. But there was no time to question it. He packed his things and boarded the next available shuttle to the galactic capital. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a series of events that would turn his life upside down. Upon arrival, David was escorted through grand halls made of materials that shimmered and pulsed with energy. The Senate building was unlike anything he had ever seen before, a blend of ancient stone and futuristic technology. He was guided through a sea of alien faces, some humanoid, others barely resembling any life form David had ever imagined. Heart raced as he entered the grand chamber where the Senate convened. At the center of the room sat the Consul, a figure of immense power in the galaxy. His name was Arson, a tall, dignified alien with scales that shimmered like gemstones and eyes that seemed to look straight through to a person's soul. The Consul's presence was commanding, and the room fell silent as he spoke. David Daniels. Arson's voice boomed across the room. You are here because of a matter of great importance to both your species and ours. David stood at attention, unsure of what to say. He had expected a meeting about trade or diplomacy, not whatever this was going to be. The Consul continued, explaining that Earth was now a valuable ally in the galactic community, a rising power in the galaxy. But there was more. We have decided, as a matter of necessity, that your species must be further united with ours. To secure the future of both our peoples, a union must be formed, Arson said, his gaze unyielding. David blinked. A union? What did that mean? As such, you, David Daniels, have been selected as the candidate for this union, the Consul explained. You are to marry my 3 granddaughters. The words hit David like a thunderclap. His mouth went dry. Marry the Consul's granddaughters? Was this some sort of elaborate joke? I assure you, this is no jest, Arson said, his tone serious. This union is not just a marriage in the traditional sense. It is a political alliance that will strengthen both Earth and our empire. It will unite us in ways that cannot be achieved through any other means. David's mind raced. He had never been part of anything this big. He was just a regular guy. What could he offer that would make him worthy of such an honor? Marrying the Consul's granddaughters? As the weight of the words pressed down on him, the granddaughters were summoned to the chamber. 3 young women entered, each with their own presence and aura. The eldest, Sorella, walked with a grace and confidence that left David in awe. She had sharp features and a fierce determination in her eyes. Esha, the middle granddaughter, had an air of intelligence about her. Her gaze was steady, calculating, yet kind. And Kaya, the youngest, exuded warmth. Her soft smile seemed to put David at ease, even though he could feel the tension in the room. The Consul spoke again. These 3 women are the future of our empire. Each one of them holds a crucial role in our society, and their union with you will solidify Earth's place in the galaxy. But more importantly, it will ensure the future of both our peoples. David looked at the granddaughters. Each of them had an undeniable beauty, but there was something more about them. They weren't just political figures, they were individuals, with their own lives, thoughts, and ambitions. David was being asked to marry all 3 of them, a decision that would change the course of his life forever. Sorella, the eldest, was the first to speak. You may not understand this now, David Daniels, she said, her voice commanding yet not unkind. But this marriage is important. It will bring unity between your people and ours. There is much at stake, and I will not allow anything to jeopardize that. the middle granddaughter added. This is not just a marriage for power. It is a marriage of duty, of honor. We have all agreed to this because it is what is best for the future. But you should know, David, that we are not doing this for our personal gain. We do this because we believe it will bring peace. Kaya, the youngest, looked at David with a softer expression. I know, this must be overwhelming, she said gently, but we will be in this together. I trust that you will make the right choice for all of us. David was stunned. His head was spinning. He was being asked to marry 3 women he had just met, not out of love, but for the future of 2 worlds. He had no idea what this would mean for his life, but one thing was clear. His future had just been written for him in ways he could never have imagined. As the Senate meeting continued, David realized that the weight of this decision would not be easy to bear. The path ahead would be filled with challenges, unknowns, and difficult choices. But one thing was certain. David Daniels' life had just taken a turn that would change everything. David Daniels sat in his small room at the Galactic Senate headquarters, his mind spinning with what had just happened. He had been told he was going to marry 3 alien women, the granddaughters of the most powerful consul in the galaxy. The weight of the situation was almost too much to bear. He had barely had time to process the reality of what was happening before the Senate meeting ended. And now he was alone, facing the consequences of a decision that was not his to make. The granddaughters were not just any women. They were key figures in the galactic political landscape. Each one had a unique role, and each one brought something different to the table. David could only imagine the expectations that had been placed on them, and now on him, the first granddaughter. Sorella had made an immediate impression. She was the eldest of the 3 and carried herself with the kind of confidence that David had never seen before. She walked with a sense of purpose, as if the universe itself bent to her will. Her sharp eyes had studied him with a keen, almost calculating gaze. When she had spoken to him in the Senate chamber, it had been clear she was not one to be easily swayed. There was no warmth in her words, only duty and resolve. David remembered the way she had addressed him. This is not a personal choice. For you, David Daniels, she had said, her voice cold, yet authoritative. It is a matter of necessity. Your people need us, and we need you. There is no room for hesitation. You will do what is required of you. He had no doubt that Sorella was a woman of power, someone who knew exactly what she wanted and would not let anything stand in her way. But there had been something unsettling in her words. Was she asking for his consent, or was she simply telling him what was going to happen? David wasn't sure, but he knew that the weight of the decision was far greater than he had imagined. Then there was Issa, the middle granddaughter. She had a quiet intensity about her that was both intriguing and intimidating. Unlike Sorella, Esha did not speak with the same forceful authority, but her eyes told a different story. There was an intelligence in them, a depth of thought that suggested she had already seen the consequences of the marriage long before. David had even set foot in the Senate building. Esha had a way of looking at him that made him feel as though she could see right through him, as though she was calculating every possible outcome of this union before he even had a chance to make up his mind. When she had spoken, her voice was measured, thoughtful. This marriage is not just about you or me, David, she had said, her tone soft but firm. It is about the future of our peoples. We cannot afford to fail. You may not understand it now, but the choices we make today will affect the rest of our lives. David had wanted to ask her more, to understand what she meant by that. But before he could speak, she had already moved on, leaving him to wonder about the deeper implications of this alliance. And then there was Kaya, the youngest of the 3. She was the one who had left David with the most conflicting feelings. While Sorella and Esha had both held their ground with cold professionalism, Kaya had seemed almost human. She smiled more often, laughed at little jokes, and seemed genuinely concerned about how David was coping with the situation. Despite her youth, there was a kindness to her that made him feel less like a pawn in a political game and more like a person who mattered. David remembered how she had looked at him with soft, understanding eyes. I know this is a lot to take. Kaya had said, her voice gentle, but we will be in this together. I want to believe that we can make this work. I want to believe that we can build something good from this marriage. Kaya's words had a warmth that David hadn't expected. It was clear that she was different from her sisters. While Sorella and Desha had been firm and unyielding, Kaya had a way of making him feel less alone in this overwhelming situation. Her sincerity was comforting, even if he couldn't yet fully understand what it meant to be a part of her life, let alone all three of their lives. As David spent more time reflecting on the situation, he realized just how complex the task before him really was. He wasn't just being asked to marry these women, he was being asked to step into a role that held immense political power. His union with the Consul's granddaughters was about more than just a personal relationship. It was about the fate of two entire species, us. His decisions would have consequences far beyond his own life, and he was beginning to feel the weight of that responsibility. But as much as the political pressure weighed on him, there was something else that gnawed at him, a sense of uncertainty about the granddaughters themselves. How much of what they had said to him was true? Did they genuinely want this marriage, or were they just playing their parts in a galactic game they had no choice but to participate in? Could he ever truly understand their roles in this, or was he simply a pawn, just like the Consul had said? David wasn't sure, but one thing was clear: his life was no longer his own. He'd been thrust into the heart of a political struggle that he had never asked for, and now he had to figure out how to navigate it. The granddaughter Sorella Esha and Kai each had their own expectations of him. They were not just alien women with different customs. They were powerful individuals who could change the course of the galaxy with their actions. He couldn't help but wonder, could he ever become the man they needed him to be? Or would the weight of this union break him? As he prepared for the coming days, David knew one thing for sure: nothing in his life would ever be the same again. David Daniels had never been one for politics. Back on Earth, he had spent his days working in a quiet office, focusing on the routine tasks of his job. He had no interest in the intricacies of intergalactic relations, let alone the lives of powerful figures like the Consul. But now, his life was inextricably tied to a political union that was bigger than anything he could have imagined. It was no longer just about him or his own wishes. The stakes had grown far higher, and David could feel the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him every day. Over the next few days, he was given more insight into the true nature of his role. It wasn't simply a marriage of convenience, it was a strategic alliance that could determine the future of both Earth and the galaxy. The Consul Arson had made it clear that David's union with his granddaughters wasn't just symbolic. It was a necessary step in ensuring the survival of their species. In his own, David had been invited to private meetings with Sorella, Ishe and Kaya, each session focused on helping him understand the complexities of their world. The more he learned, the more overwhelmed he became. Sorella had been the first to sit him down. She had taken him to a grand room with a large table and holographic displays of star maps and political diagrams. "David," she began, her tone as cold and direct as ever, "I know you don't fully understand why you've been chosen for this. But the reality is simple. Your people need us, and we need you." David had tried to process her words. "What do you mean by that? Why me? I'm just an ordinary human." Sorella's gaze was steady. "Your people have the potential to change the course of this galaxy. Earth's position is becoming more powerful by the day. But we're facing an enemy who is already at our doorstep. We need allies. And your union with US will solidify that alliance. Together, we will stand against the threat. If we fail, both our worlds could be destroyed." David swallowed. Hard, he hadn't realized the full extent of the danger. The threat was real, and his role in all of this was more crucial than he'd ever imagined. He wasn't just a husband in this scenario, he was a symbol of hope. A bridge between two worlds. Later that day, Esha met with him in a quiet garden outside the Senate building. The air was cool, and the scent of alien flowers filled the air. Esha's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Sorella's sharpness, but her words held the same weight. "David," she said gently, "what Sorella didn't tell you is that the enemy we face isn't just a military threat. It's a political one as well. There are factions within the Galactic Council who would rather see Earth fall than ally. With us, your marriage is a way to show that we are serious about this alliance. It's not just about love, it's about survival. David listened carefully, trying to absorb the complexity of the situation. But why can't you just form an alliance through diplomacy? Why does it have to be a marriage? Esha's eyes softened. Marriage between our species has been a tradition for generations. It's a symbol of trust, of unity, and it's something that can't be easily broken. It sends a message that goes beyond diplomacy. It shows the strength of our commitment to one another. David was still struggling to understand. He had been raised in a world where politics were complicated, but this was something entirely different. The fate of entire species rested on the decisions he would make in the coming days, and he couldn't help but feel unprepared. That evening, Kaya invited him to dinner. They sat together at a small table. And for the first time since he'd arrived on the galactic capital, David felt a sense of normalcy. Kaya was kind and approachable, and she had an easy way of making him feel at ease. "I know this is a lot to take in," Kaya said as she served him food. "But the truth is, we didn't choose this path for ourselves either. We're all here because we have a duty to our people. And you're a part of that now." David hesitated. "But what if I don't want to be? What if I can't do this? I'm not a leader. I'm just a regular guy." Kaya reached across the table and gently placed her hand over his. "We all have our roles, David. None of us are born leaders. But sometimes life places us in situations where we have to rise to the occasion. I know you don't feel ready, but you're more capable than you think." Her words were comforting, but David still felt the pressure building. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't a soldier. He was a man from Earth, thrust into the center of an intergalactic struggle. The enormity of what he was being asked to do was overwhelming. As the days passed, David continued to meet with the Granddaughters and learn more about the political situation. The enemy, as it turned out, wasn't just a rival empire, it was a collection of rogue factions within the galaxy, bent on disrupting the peace and stability that the Consul and his allies had worked so hard to maintain. These factions were ruthless, and they would stop at nothing to see Earth fall. David realized that his role in this was more than just symbolic. It was about the survival of both Earth and the alien species he was now connected to. The marriage was a way to solidify a bond that would send a powerful message to the galaxy. But the truth weighed heavily on him. He had no choice but to go. Along with this, he had to marry the Granddaughters, not just for his own future, but for the future of the galaxy. And as much as he wanted to run away, David knew deep down that there was no escape. His destiny had been sealed. The days after David's realization were filled with increasing pressure. He had been thrust into a situation where his every move mattered not only for his future, but for the future of Earth and the Galactic Empire. As he met more with the Consul's Granddaughters, David began to understand that the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. It wasn't just about his marriage to them, it was about the survival of their people. And that burden was growing heavier by the day. David's meetings with Sorella, Asha, and Kaya had become routine, but each of them seemed to approach the marriage with a different attitude. Sorella, the eldest, continued to speak of their union as a necessary duty, a vital political move for the future of the galaxy. She rarely showed any warmth toward him, and her eyes often held the cold calculation of a strategist. She never hesitated to remind David of the responsibility that lay on his shoulders. "David," Sorella had said in their last meeting, "you must understand that we are not playing games here. This marriage is the key to an alliance that will protect us from the enemy. Our people will look to you to lead, whether you feel ready for it or not." David had nodded, but the pressure of it all was starting to weigh on him. How could he, a regular man from Earth, ever be expected to lead alongside these powerful women? And more importantly, what if he couldn't live up to their expectations? Esha, the middle granddaughter, had been more understanding, but her calm exterior only masked her own worries. In their discussions, she often spoke of the politics behind the marriage, explaining how factions within the Galactic Council were already trying to undermine the alliance. She spoke with an intelligence and foresight that left David in awe. "There are those in the council who don't want this alliance to succeed," Esha had explained one evening. "They see your marriage as a threat to their power. They will do everything they can to stop it, David. You will need to be prepared for the political games that will be played. David's head was spinning. First, he had to navigate the expectations of the granddaughters, then the pressures of their political roles, and now he was learning that there were factions actively working against the marriage. Every step he took felt like it was leading him deeper into a world he didn't understand, a world where the stakes were much higher than anything he had ever faced. But it was Kaya, the youngest, who left David with the most conflicting emotions. Unlike her sisters, Kaya had been open about her feelings, and it was clear she didn't view the marriage as just a political duty. Her presence was warm, and she had a way of making David feel like he was more than just a pawn in a galactic game. But even Kaya's kindness couldn't erase the tension that hung in the air. At dinner one evening, David couldn't help but ask her, "Do you really want this marriage, Kaya? Or is it something you feel forced into because of your family's expectations?" Kaya had paused, looking at him with a mixture of sadness and understanding. "I didn't ask for this," she said softly. "But the reality is, this is the world we live in. We all have our roles to play. I've accepted that. But that doesn't mean I don't care about you, David. I want this to work, and I want you to be happy. I just don't know how." David looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. The more he learned about Kaya, the more he realized how much she was struggling with this too. She wasn't just a political pawn, she was a person with her own hopes, dreams, and fears. And yet, in this complex galactic struggle, it felt as though their personal desires didn't matter. Tension between the granddaughters was growing, and David could feel it. It wasn't just the external political pressure that was weighing on them, it was the unspoken rivalry between the three sisters. Despite their outward cooperation, there were moments when David could see the cracks. In their relationships, Sorella, the eldest, had made it clear that she saw herself as the leader of the group. She had always been the most authoritative, the most prepared to take charge. Esha, though calm and measured, had her own ideas about how the marriage should play out. And David could sense that her growing frustration with the situation was taking its toll, but it was Kaya, the youngest, who had begun to show signs of rebellion. She was the most outspoken about her doubts, about the role she was expected to play in this political game. She had shared her concerns with David late. One night, after the others had gone to bed, "Do you think we're just being used?" Kaya had asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if I can keep pretending that this is okay. I don't know if I can keep pretending that I'm okay with this marriage." David had been taken aback by her honesty. "Kaya, No, it's hard for you too," she had interrupted. "But this isn't just about us. It's about what we represent. And I don't know if we can keep pretending that we're okay with this alliance. Sometimes it feels like we're nothing more than tools." David hadn't known how to respond. He understood her pain, he shared it. But what choice did they have? The alternative was even more terrifying. The next few days were filled with growing tension, and David began to realize that the granddaughters' rivalry wasn't just a result of political pressure. It was personal. They'd each been forced into a role they hadn't chosen, and now, as the wedding drew closer, the cracks in their relationships were beginning to show. David knew that he had to find a way to navigate the growing tension between the granddaughters, but he didn't know how. The more he learned, the more he realized that there was no easy answer. But one thing was clear. Whatever the future held, he had to stay strong for himself and for the galaxy. David sat in the quiet room of the Senate building, his mind spinning. The days were growing shorter, and the date of the wedding was rapidly approaching. The weight of what he was about to undertake was crushing. He had thought that marrying the Consul's granddaughters was simply a political maneuver, a way to cement alliances between Earth and the galaxy. But the more he learned, the more he realized there was something much deeper at play. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. He had learned that the Consul's granddaughters weren't just pawns in a political game. They were more than that. Each of them held power, influence, and the future of the galaxy in their hands. Their marriage to him was not just symbolic, it was essential. Their roles were interconnected with the fate of their people, and David's role was to bind them all together. But as he learned more, he began to realize that this union was not only a political necessity, it was part of something much larger and far more dangerous. That evening, David sat alone with Esha. The middle granddaughter, who had been the most reserved, had requested to meet with him privately. He could sense the tension in the air as she sat across from him, her expression serious. "David," she began softly, "there is something you need to understand. Something I haven't told you before." David looked at her, his heart racing. "What is it?" Esha hesitated before continuing. "The marriage between you and us, it's more than just about strengthening our position. There are forces in the galaxy who are trying to undermine the balance of power. There are factions within the Galactic Council who want to see Earth and our people fall. They've been working in the shadows, and their plan is nearly complete." David's eyes widened. "Well, what do you mean? What kind of forces?" Esha's voice dropped to a whisper. "There are extremist rogue factions who believe that the galaxy should be ruled by one dominant race. They see the growing power of Earth and the Galactic Alliance as a threat. They've been conspiring to weaken our defenses, so distrust, and ultimately destroy us from within." The idea that there were groups actively trying to tear apart everything he had come to understand about the galaxy was unsettling. "And this marriage?" David asked, his voice tight with fear. "How does it stop them?" Isha's eyes met his. "Our marriage to you is not just a union of love or politics. It's a symbol of unity between Earth and our people. But more than that, it's a way to protect us. The enemies we face are not just outside forces. They've infiltrated the Council, and they will stop at nothing to destroy the Alliance. Our marriage will act as a shield. It will make it harder for them to manipulate the situation." David's mind was racing. He had never realized how deep the political games ran in this galaxy. I had assumed that the dangers came from war, from armies fighting across space. But this was different. It was a battle for control, a battle fought with shadows, whispers, and hidden motives. And he was at the center of it all. Ha leaned forward, her gaze intense. "David, the enemy will try to turn us against each other. They will use our fears, our doubts. They will try to make you question everything. But we must stay united. If we fall apart, the galaxy will fall with us." David felt a chill run down his spine. He had always thought of the marriage as a personal, due to something that was simply expected of him. But now, he understood that it was a key part of something much larger. It wasn't just about his future. It was about the future of the entire galaxy. Later that night, David couldn't sleep. The weight of everything he had learned pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. He had come to this place with no idea of what was truly at stake. But now everything had changed. His marriage to the Consul's granddaughters was no longer just a political alliance. It was the linchpin in a struggle for survival, a struggle that would determine the future of two species. The next morning, he sat with Kaya in the garden again. She had always been the one to offer him comfort, and he needed it more than ever. The calmness of the garden, the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze, provided a temporary escape from the chaos swirling in his mind. "I learned something last night," David began, his voice low. "Esha told me that there are forces working against the Alliance. There are factions that want to destroy everything we're trying to build. It's not just about politics. It's a fight for survival." Kaya listened quietly, her expression solemn. "I knew something like that was coming," she said softly. "We've been warned. The marriage isn't just about us. It's about protecting our people from those who want to see us fail." David ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the situation bearing down on him. "I didn't know. I didn't understand how dangerous this really was." Kaya reached out and took his hand. None of us did. "But now that we know, we have to fight for what we believe in. Together." David squeezed her hand, grateful for her support. He could feel the strength in her words, in the resolve behind her voice. She was right. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about their future, their people, and the galaxy they all inhabited. As the days went on, David's relationship with the granddaughters grew more complex. They were no longer just political figures. They were his partners in this struggle, and together they would have to face the challenges ahead. There was no turning back. The truth had been unveiled, and David now knew what he had to do. had to stand with them, no matter the cost. The wedding was still days away, but David knew that by the time it arrived, his life would have changed forever. The galaxy was watching, and he had to be ready. The day of the wedding had finally arrived. David Daniels stood at the center of the grand hall, feeling the weight of the moment. The room was filled with alien dignitaries from across the galaxy, all here to witness a union that would forever change the future of Earth and the Consul's people. The granddaughters, Sarala, Esha, and Kaya stood by his side, their faces calm and composed.
Ow.
Though David could feel the tension in the air, David had never imagined that he would find himself here. Just weeks ago, he was an ordinary man, living a quiet life on Earth, far removed from the political struggles of the galaxy. But now, as he stood before these powerful figures, he realized just how much his life had changed. He was no longer just David Daniels. He was a symbol of peace, of unity between two worlds. Sarala stood closest to him, her eyes sharp and focused as always. She had maintained her cold, calculated demeanor throughout the days leading up to the wedding. David had learned to respect her strength, but he also understood the burden she carried. This marriage was not something she had chosen, but it was something she had accepted as her duty. It was the same with Esha, who had become more withdrawn over the past few days, and even Kaya, who had grown quieter. They were all facing the same truth. This was not just a marriage, it was a political move that could make or break the future of their species. As the ceremony began, David found himself overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. The Consul, Arson, stood at the front of the room, his presence commanding attention as he began the proceedings. Today, unite two worlds, Arson's voice echoed through the hall. This union between David Daniels and my granddaughters is more than just a bond between individuals. It is the future of our people, a promise of protection, of peace. We are stronger together, and this marriage will ensure that strength. David's heart raced as he listened. The weight of the words was not lost on him. He wasn't just marrying 3 women. He was committing himself to the future of 2 worlds, to the survival of his species and theirs. It was an overwhelming thought, and for a moment he wondered if he was truly up to the task. Sarala stepped forward, her voice steady as she spoke her vows. I promise to stand by you, David Daniels, as we unite our worlds. I will not falter in my duty, and I will support you as we face the challenges ahead. Esha followed, her words calm and thoughtful. I pledge to work with you, to protect our future. Together, we will overcome the obstacles that stand in our way. Finally, Kaya stepped forward, her eyes softer than before, filled with warmth and hope. I promise to stand beside you, David. I believe in our future, and I will trust you to help us build it. As the ceremony continued, David felt a sense of resolve settle over him. He had been scared, unsure of his place in all of this, but now, standing with these women, he knew what he had to do. To be the man they needed him to be. He had to fight for their future, for the future of both their worlds. The vows were exchanged, and the moment had come. The Consul's voice rang out, by the power granted to me, I now declare you united. Earth and the Consul's people are bound together, stronger than ever before. The crowd erupted in applause, but David barely heard it. His mind was elsewhere, focused on the 3 women standing beside him. They were no longer just political allies. They were his partners in this journey. Each of them had their own strengths, their own struggles, and now they would face the challenges ahead together. As the ceremony ended and the guests began to move toward the grand banquet hall, David found himself alone for a brief moment. He stepped outside into the cool air, taking a deep breath. The sky above was filled with distant stars, and for the first time, David felt a sense of calm. He had done it. The wedding was over, and the future was waiting. But even as he stood there, he knew that the real work was just beginning. The marriage had solidified the alliance between Earth and the Consul's people, but that didn't mean the war was over. The factions who opposed them were still out there, still waiting for a chance to strike. The future was uncertain, and the path ahead would be filled with challenges. But David was no longer afraid. He had a purpose now. David turned to see Sarala, approaching, Her usual coldness had softened, just a little. "You did well today," she said, her voice more measured than before, "but this is just the beginning. There's still much to do." "I know," David replied, meeting her gaze, "but I'm ready." Ash stepped forward next, her eyes thoughtful. "And we've made a good start, but we will need to stay vigilant. There are still threats both inside and outside the council. We cannot let our guard down," David nodded. "We'll face them together." Finally, Kaya joined them, her face warm with a quiet smile. "We have a future now, David. It may not be perfect, but we'll build it together." David looked at all three of them, realizing just how far he had come. He had started this journey unsure of what the future held, but now he saw a path ahead. They were united, and together they would face whatever came next. The Consul's granddaughters had become more than just allies. They had become his family. And in the uncertain galaxy they lived in, that bond would be their greatest strength. David took a deep breath and smiled. The future might be unknown, but he was no longer afraid to face it. With the Consul's granddaughters by his side, he knew they could overcome anything.